Homage to the Triple Gem. So, welcome everybody. We're going to try a new format today, and that format is a Sutta study format. So, today's Sutta study is going to be based around a kind of, you say, Dhamma point that keeps arising over and over again, which is, did the Buddha teach that there was a way of meditating where you could focus really intensely on just one thing, like say for the breath? So this video is a kind of follow-up video to the video about whether the Buddha taught meditation or recommended the practice of meditation before one is a Sotapanna. In that video I argued that yes, the Buddha did teach this. He did teach it to lay people, did teach it to monks essentially, and had suttas in that video describing how the Buddha taught the Sati Patana to lay people. So in this video, we're going to take that a little bit of a step further and address a more refined point under that, which is, did the Buddha teach a method of meditation which wasn't just contemplation, but which was focusing, say, on the breath in order to essentially cut off discursive thoughts and focusing on that really intently. Is that something that the Buddha recommended, and is that backed up by the suttas, this kind of way of meditating that's commonly taught these days? So I think most people can guess where I stand, which is that yes, the Buddha did teach this, but let's jump in there and see what suttas support this, what suttas support the idea that the Buddha did teach learning to focus just on the breath in and of itself, and to do that very intensely. So, first stop. The first sutta we'll take a look at, try to minimize, let's get this out of the way, try to minimize this screen here, give people, there we go, make me a little smaller. So the first sutta we're going to take a look at is the Sedakasuta, the Beauty Queen. Beauty Queen is a translation of courtesan. So courtesans were essentially, very basically like a kind of a geisha in Indian society. And in addition to their, more under the, we say like unsavory things that they did, they were also some of the people who helped to originate what's now like classical forms of Indian dancing. So that's something to keep in mind as we go through this. So just start reading here. The Blessed One said, "Suppose, monks, that a large crowd of people were to come thronging together saying, 'The Beauty Queen, the Beauty Queen,' the courtesan. And suppose that the Beauty Queen were highly accomplished at singing and dancing, so that an even greater crowd would come thronging saying, 'The Beauty Queen is singing, the Beauty Queen is dancing.' Then a man would come along desiring life and shrinking from death, desiring pleasure and abhorring pain. They would say to him, 'Now look here, mister, you must take this bowl filled to the brim with oil and carry it on your head between the great crowd and the Beauty Queen. A man with a raised sword will follow right behind you, and wherever you spill even a drop of oil, right there will he cut off your head.' Now what do you think, monks? Would that man, not paying attention to the bowl of oil, let himself get distracted outside? No, Lord. I have given you this parable to convey a meaning. The meaning is this. The bowl of oil, the bowl filled to the brim with oil, stands for mindfulness immersed in the body. Thus you should train yourselves. We will develop mindfulness immersed in the body. We will pursue it, hand it the reins. Take it as a basis, steady it, consolidate it, and undertake it well. That is how you should train yourself." So I'll zoom up a bit. So here we have a sutta in which the Buddha is saying, giving a really intense simile. So the crowd is really packed, there's a courtesan dancing, he's got a bowl of oil on his head, and you can't let even a drop spill without somebody, if you do, somebody will cut your head off. So the Buddha says, what do you think? Would the monks, would that man let his awareness essentially go away from the bowl of oil? And no, and the Buddha says in that same way you should develop mindfulness immersed in the body. So we're talking about a really intense focus on not something that's a contemplation, but on essentially like a single point, a single topic. This is the flavor that metaphor conveys. So what we've established so far, the Buddha did teach that you should really direct mindfulness in a really intense way. This is a much more intense application of mindfulness than most people will be capable of even approaching when they first start to meditate. And the Buddha is recommending this level of mindfulness. So it's something, you build up to that. So you might say that this is the Buddha's recommendation for, really strong levels of focus. You might even say like a hyper focus or an exponential hyper focus is the degree to which this should be developed, this mindfulness of the body. So he's recommending that. It's clear that we've got a recommendation to really keep mindfulness really strong on a single topic. So the next question is, what does the Buddha mean by mindfulness of the body? So let's head over to Sati Patana Sutta, and I'll make myself small again. Make my face small. Okay, so let's scroll down and take a look at what it has to say about mindfulness of the body. So here we have the beginning of the description of mindfulness of the body. There's a case where a monk, having gone to the wilderness, to the shade of a tree, or to an empty building, sits down folding his legs crosswise, holding his body erect and establishing mindfulness to the fore. Always mindful, he breathes in, mindful, he breathes out. Breathing in long, he discerns, I'm breathing in long, or breathing out long, he discerns, I'm breathing out long. Breathing in short, he discerns, I'm breathing in short, or breathing out short, he discerns, I'm breathing out short. He trains himself, I will breathe in sensitive to the entire body. He trains himself, I will breathe out sensitive to the entire body. He trains himself, I will breathe in calming bodily fabrication. He trains himself, I will breathe out calming bodily fabrication. Just as a dexterous turner or his apprentice, when making a long turn, discerns, I am making a long turn, or making a short turn, discerns, I am making a short turn. In the same way, the monk, when breathing in long, discerns, I am breathing in long, etc. So that's the first application of mindfulness of the body. It also includes knowing when you're walking, standing, however the body's disposed. It also includes knowing what you're doing with the body. Are you folding up your sangati? You're folding up your robes? Are you eating? Are you talking? What are you doing? Falling asleep? So, in other words, this it's being aware of the postures of the body and what it's being used for, as well as mindfulness of breathing. It also includes asubha kammatthana, contemplating the unattractive aspects of the inner parts of the body. So that's what we have here. In this section. Let's see if I can just get a little marker or so. See what happens there. Yeah, so there we go. I think you can see this on the screen, this section. And let's turn that off. And let's move on down. And then also you have the cemetery contemplations. So that's here, the cemetery contemplation. So let's zoom out and give a little commentary. So what we have here is a description of mindfulness of the body, where the Buddha's explicitly mentioning mindfulness of breathing. And not all the aspects of mindfulness of breathing are included in mindfulness of the body. Doesn't include the parts of the Anapanasati Sutta that deal with jhanas, that deal with contemplating impermanence. What we have here is the parts that are essentially dealing with knowing when the breath's coming in, going out, calming the body, and breathing in and out with the whole body. In the Anapanasati Sutta, the Buddha calls the breath a body among bodies. So it is essentially referring to the energy system that goes throughout the whole body. And what we can see here is in the example of the turner kind of knows when he's making a turn. In the same way, a monk knows when he's breathing in long, breathing out long, breathing in short, breathing out short. So as part of mindfulness of the body, it's not the only way one can practice mindfulness of the body, but there is the topic right there that's taught to many people right off the bat when they first start meditating, to watch the breath and just watch the breath. Don't add anything to it. Don't do anything to it. Just learn to become skilled in just watching the breath as it comes in, watching the breath as it goes out, knowing if it's coming in long, knowing if it's coming in short. So when you link this up with the previous sutta, we do clearly have here a recommendation from the Buddha that to focus really intensely on just this topic of watching the breath is one way to do it. Other ways that a person can do it are also there in the mindfulness, in the description of mindfulness of the body. A person can be aware when they're going forward and backwards, when they're doing things with the body, and also the asubha kamatanas, etc. But the main point here is the degree of mindfulness to which one wants to apply oneself to mindfulness of the body. Backing up a bit, the definition of mindfulness means the ability to keep something in mind. It's defined in different ways, essentially two different ways. One way, when it's defined as a faculty, in terms of the 5 faculties, it's defined as whatever mindfulness you get from the 4 foundations of mindfulness, which we have here. So whatever mindfulness you get from practicing breath meditation, from practicing body contemplation, from practicing mindfulness of feeling, that's mindfulness. Another one is the Buddha essentially equates mindfulness with the ability to remember. So what you have here when you put these two things together is the ability to bring something up into the mind, from memory essentially, and the ability to keep that thing in mind. So those two things together combine to essentially define the faculty of mindfulness, the faculty of sati. It's memory in the sense that you remember. You can bring things up from the past, you can remember stuff from the past, but you also can keep what you want in mind without the mind rushing out and going anywhere else. So it's essentially the ability to keep things in mind, to bring up a topic that you want to think about and to keep it in mind. So here, the topic that's being kept in mind, according to the Buddha's instructions on mindfulness of the body, can be the breath. So let's jump over to our next sutta. This is another important sutta, and I'll minimize myself here. It's called the 6 Animals Sutta. There you go, move up to the corner. So we'll just move over this first part. So in the first part, the Buddha is talking about a monk who goes into the village and somebody just calls him a thorn and an impurity for no reason. And the Buddha says you should know this person to be a thorn, and you should understand what restraint is and what's lack of restraint. So here we have, what is lack of restraint? There is the case where a monk, seeing a form with the eye is set on pleasing forms, is repelled by unpleasing forms, and remains with body mindfulness, unestablished, with limited awareness. He doesn't discern as it has come to be the awareness release, discernment release, where any evil, unskillful mental qualities that have arisen utterly cease without remainder. Hearing a sound, smelling an aroma, tasting a flavor, touching a tactile sensation, cognizing an idea, he is set on pleasing ideas and is repelled by unpleasing ideas, etc. Just as if a person catching 6 animals of different ranges, of different habitats, were to bind them with a strong rope. Catching a snake, he would bind it with a strong rope. Catching a crocodile, a bird, a dog, a hyena, a monkey, he would bind it with a strong rope. Binding them all with a strong rope and tying a knot in the middle, he would set chase to them. Then those 6 animals of different ranges, of different habitats, would each pull towards its own range and habitat. The snake would pull, thinking, I'll go into the anthill. The crocodile would pull, thinking, I'll go into the water. The bird would pull, thinking, I'll fly up into the air. The dog would pull, thinking, I'll go into the village. The hyena would pull, thinking, I'll go into the charnel ground. The monkey would pull, thinking, I'll go into the forest. And when these 6 animals became internally exhausted, they would submit, they would surrender, they would come under the sway of whichever among them was strongest. In the same way, in any monk whose mindfulness immersed in the body is undeveloped and unpursued, the eye pulls towards pleasing forms, while unpleasing forms are repellent. The ear pulls towards pleasing sounds, etc. And what is restraint? There is the case where a monk, seeing a form with the eye is not set on pleasing forms, is not repelled by unpleasing forms, and remains with body mindfulness established with immeasurable awareness. ... Hearing an ear, smelling an aroma, tasting a flavor, touching a tactile sensation, cognizing an idea. Just as if a person catching 6 animals of different ranges, of different habitats, were to bind them with a strong rope, catching a snake, crocodile, bird, dog, hyena, monkey. He would bind them with all with a strong rope. He would tether them to a strong post or stake. Then those 6 animals of different ranges, of different habitats, would each pull towards its own range and habitat. The snake would pull, thinking, I'll go into the anthill, etc. In the same way, and then when these 6 animals became internally exhausted, they would stand, sit, or lie down right there next to the post or stake. In the same way, in any monk whose mindfulness immersed in the body is developed and pursued, the eye doesn't pull towards pleasing forms, and unpleasing forms are not repellent. The ear doesn't pull towards pleasing sounds, the nose doesn't pull towards pleasing aromas, the tongue doesn't pull towards pleasing flavors, the body doesn't pull towards pleasing tactile sensations, etc. The strong post or stake is a synonym for mindfulness immersed in the body. Thus you should train yourself. We will develop mindfulness immersed in the body, etc. So this sutta right here is essentially describing how one can yoke the mind to one of the topics in mindfulness of the body. Here in our example, can yoke it to the breath and just being observant of the breath as it comes in and goes out. There's much more to breath meditation than that necessarily, but doing that is an option with this extremely intense focus. And if one does that, then the tendency of the mind to want to launch out, to see things, to hear things, to smell things, gets reduced. So this sutta makes the point that practicing mindfulness of the body is related to restraint. Practicing mindfulness of the body, practicing breath meditation, feeds into restraint. And what a person will tend to find as they practice breath meditation is that when they go out and say they contact something that used to give them an immediate reaction, it's almost like there's more time between the contact and when the person chooses to react. So if a person's really angry, then somebody, often gets angry. They meet somebody who usually says cruel things to them. The person says a cruel thing. Previously, it would be like they say the cruel thing, anger comes up, they say something back. But what they may tend to find, they practice breath meditation, then in this way, then what can happen is that impulse will arise more slowly. The thoughts associated with the impulse arise more slowly. And so it's like one has the contact, then one has more time to decide, what do I really want to say to this person? Do I really want to say something harsh? Do I want to, remain silent? Do I want to say something kind? What's the appropriate response in this situation in line with the Dhamma? So in this way, breath meditation can aid in restraint. This is one of the ways. It can give a person a chance to choose how they're going to react. Are they going to grab onto this thing or not? Is it skillful to grab onto it or not? Another way that another way one can look at breath meditation aiding in sense restraint, and similar to these animals, is that when one focuses on just a single topic over and over, just the breath, single topic like the breath, which is very simple, it's not involving a lot of thinking, and one is essentially using it to cut discursive thinking down. There's a couple of suttas which mention this as well, using the breath to cut discursive thoughts. So won't jump into those suttas, but just enough to know that it's there. So using the breath to cut discursive thinking down like this, so one's mind is becoming increasingly refined, increasingly still. When one does this, then actually one's mind does not want to launch out to these things automatically anyway, because one has essentially been training it to just stay with the breath, which, the tactile sensation of the breath is not like something, overwhelmingly distracting, like some really strong sensual pleasure. It's, it's not like eating a bag of chips or seeing some really distracting movie or something like this. It's, it's a sensation of the breath which can grow more subtle, and the mind can grow more still. So when one trains the mind to be this way habitually, then that habit activates when one goes out, walks in the village, goes out, walks wherever. It can activate, in that one's inclination will be more and more to what they call mental seclusion, to citta viveka, to staying with the breath, or which is relatively close. One of the physical sensations is closest to the mind. Basically staying with this stillness in the mind rather than having the mind rush out. So it becomes increasingly the case, can become increasingly the case in degrees, that one actually makes a conscious choice. Well, I'm going to look here, because the mind is inclining, to go to the breath. It's not inclining just to rush out and go look or go here. So to send the mind out to these external sense media becomes something that's more and more under one's conscious control, and can even be something that one will require to make more and more of a conscious decision to send the mind out there, if one is used to just keeping it on the breath. I mean, it's not going to be like one's senses shut down and one can't, one has to make it some explicit thought to look. But in terms of degrees, we're talking in terms of degrees here. So that's another way that it can aid sense restraint. And just doing this, when one does practicing breath meditation like this, then one's thoughts, the way that one's thoughts would rush out, the way that one's intentions would rush out, they become subdued by being trained, by being stuck to this post as a kind of training in the mind. So let's move on from there. So what we've essentially established here so far, keeping the mind on one topic, mindfulness immersed in the body, like a man carrying a bowl of oil through his head. Mindfulness immersed in the body includes just watching the breath. And here are some of the benefits of that, the ways in which that influences sense restraint. And, by extension, influences one's ability to keep the precepts, can help with developing wholesome qualities in a whole lot of ways. So, next point, let's talk a bit about the lifestyle, that how much of one's day should one devote to doing this, say as a monk, or just like as an ideal template. So we can take a look over here. This is an important sutta called the Dhamma-Vinaya Sutta, and there's two of them. This is Anguttara Nikaya 573. So let me shrink down to size a bit here. There we go. Then a certain monk went to the Blessed One, and on arrival, having bowed down to him, sat to one side. As he was sitting there, he said to the Blessed One, "One dwelling in the Dhamma, one dwelling in the Dhamma. Thus it is said, Lord, to what extent is a monk one dwelling in the Dhamma? Monk, there is a case where a monk studies the Dhamma, dialogues, narratives, mixed prose and verse, explanations, verses, spontaneous explanations, quotations, burst stories, amazing events, question and answers. He spends the day in Dhamma study. He neglects seclusion. He doesn't devote himself to internal tranquility of awareness. This is called a monk keen on study, not one dwelling in the Dhamma. Then there is the case where a monk takes the Dhamma as he has heard and studied it and teaches it in detail to others. He spends the day in Dhamma description. He neglects seclusion, etc. There is the case where a monk takes the Dhamma as he has heard and studied it and recites it in full detail. He spends the day in Dhamma recitation. He neglects seclusion, etc. Then there is the case where a monk takes the Dhamma as he has heard and studied it and thinks about it, evaluates it, and examines it with his intellect. He spends the day in Dhamma thinking. He neglects seclusion. He doesn't devote himself to internal tranquility of awareness, etc. Then there is the case where a monk studies the Dhamma, dialogues, narratives of mixed prose and verse, explanations, verses, spontaneous explanations, quotations, burst stories, amazing events, question and answer sessions. He doesn't spend the day in Dhamma study. He doesn't neglect seclusion. He devotes himself to internal tranquility of awareness. This is called a monk dwelling in the Dhamma. So let's just zoom out here. So here the Buddha isn't saying that a monk can't study, can't contemplate, can't teach, but the majority of a monk, we'll use this as a template, the majority of the ideal template for the way a person will spend their day is they spend most of it devoted to meditation. There's two suttas here. This one uses internal tranquility of awareness. The second one says he goes further from his study and understands its meaning with wisdom, which can be taken to basically mean cultivates the perceptions of vipassana, like cultivates perceptions of not self, etc., in such a way that one actually becomes dispassionate towards these things and lets them go. So we're talking about meditation here in both cases, what we might call like sanya meditation topics, perception meditation topics, like perception of impermanence, perception of suffering. Another one, the samatha topics, mindfulness of breathing is one. There's others, the Brahma Viharas, the Kasinas, that tend to generate calm. So the bulk of a monk's day should be spent doing that. Other things are kind of side projects. So also should mention, there's a lot of different suttas which speak poorly of doing a lot of work. They list it essentially as a cause of decline if a monk is doing work all the time. So this doing work is not even included in this list, but doing work, sometimes one has to do it, obviously should not take up the majority of one's day. So let's jump over to the next sutta. This is a standard, there we go. This is a standard description of a monk's day, how a monk should spend his day. So we'll just zoom out. It's called Devotion to Wakefulness. Okay. And how is a monk devoted to wakefulness? There is the case where a monk during the day, sitting and pacing back and forth, cleanses his mind of any qualities that would hold the mind in check. During the first watch of the night, dusk to 10 p.m., sitting and pacing back and forth, he cleanses his mind of any qualities that would hold the mind in check. During the second watch of the night, 10 p.m. to 2 a.m., reclining on his right side, he takes up the lion's posture, one foot placed on top of the other, mindful, alert, with his mind set on getting up, either as soon as he awakens or a particular time, in brackets. During the last watch of the night, 2 a.m. to dawn, sitting and pacing back and forth, he cleanses his mind of any qualities that would hold the mind in check. This is how a monk is devoted to wakefulness. So here, let's zoom out here. There we go. So here what we have is essentially a portrait of the bulk of how a monk should be practicing during his day in this description of devotion to wakefulness. What it means to be practicing meditation, what it means to be devoted to an internal tranquility of awareness. When one sees these kind of standard descriptions, which appear a lot of different places, then you get the impression of sitting and pacing back and forth means walking and sitting meditation. Taking up whatever meditation topic is conducive for oneself to eliminate defilements. In our example, can be taken up this topic of just staying with the breath in and of itself, and cutting off discursive thought, focusing on it really intensely. So let's go to our next sutta. So this is another template that we have here from the Nālaka Sutta. So the Nālaka Sutta, there's a gentleman who goes and asks the Buddha, he says, teach me the highest sagacity, I long for the alms round. So the Buddha gives him a kind of a template of how a monk should practice. And this is one part of that. Let's move on up here, move my face up there. Having gone on his alms round, the sage should then go to the forest, approaching the root of a tree. The enlightened one, intent on jhana, should find delight in the forest, should practice jhana at the foot of a tree, attaining his own satisfaction. Then, at the end of the night, he should go to the village, not delighting in an invitation or a gift from the village. Having gone to the village, the sage should not go forcing his way among families. Cutting off chatter, he shouldn't utter a scheming word. I got something, that's fine. I got nothing, that too is good. Being such with regards to both, he returns to that very same tree. So here we have an image, zoom out, of monastic life where this is a monk who's practicing Rukamula Senasana, where a monk is living at the root of a tree. And then after he goes on alms round, he comes back to the tree and essentially keeps practicing meditation. So that's an interesting point about monastic life. There can be this recommendation to, after your alms round, just kind of stay in one place. I mean, it's not a categorical thing, but what you see is a monk coming back to his kuti, coming back to their hut, staying in one place essentially, for most of the day until, there's many suttas which talk about when the day's abiding was finished, they kind of come out at night, maybe have some Dhamma discussion. But spending the majority of one's day standing, walking, pacing back and forth and sitting, cleansing one's mind of unwholesome states. And this can be done using a topic like the breath. So let's see what our last one is here. Okay, got that. So, zoom out, or zoom in, whatever you might call it, make my face small. So, we'll finish with a small quote from the Buddha here. So the Buddha, after describing the various ways which monks could spend their day, he says, "Now, monk, I have taught you the one keen on study, the one keen on description, the one keen on recitation, the one keen on thinking, and the one dwelling in the Dhamma. Whatever a teacher should do, seeking the welfare of his disciples, out of sympathy for them, that I have done for you. Over there are the roots of trees, over there are empty huts. Practice jhana, monk. Do not be heedless. Don't later fall into regret. This is our message to you." So that practice jhana is jayata bhikkhave, and can also, in the second sutta, that injunction can also mean to practice these vipassana topics. But the putting these suttas together that we've discussed, it becomes very clear. Oops, I'll zoom out here before describing this. It becomes very clear that it is possible. The Buddha does recommend very intense focus, like a man with a bowl of oil on his head, on mindfulness of the body being inclusive of the breath, and doing this in such a way that the thoughts that one might have, one uses to cut off discursive thoughts, as mentioned, appears in the suttas many different times, and doing this, one's pull to the external world through the eye, the ear, the nose, the tongue, the body, and the mind. These things are staked to the breath in such a way that they just fall down right there. And the mind can more or less stay with the breath. And this leads to restraint for the reasons that I mentioned, because when it's training the mind to stay with a non-sensual object, it inclines that way even afterwards. It slows the thoughts that one might have, because one is cutting discursive thinking, slows the thoughts and intentions, so that when encounters a contact, one has more time to choose how one wants to react to that. And the Buddha, in recommending the lifestyle, doesn't recommend that monks spend their day studying, spend their day working, spend their day doing these things. That does not count as meditation. It counts as studying, working, reciting. When he talks about meditation, he's separating that out, separating internal tranquility of awareness, separating, going further and understanding it with wisdom in the next sutta, separating that out from all these activities. When we jump into his descriptions on devotion to wakefulness, one of the standard ways that monks should spend their day, describes sitting and pacing back and forth, which essentially means formal meditation. So spending most of the day engaged in formal meditation, doing some study, etc., is the ideal is a template for monks that's recommended by the Buddha. So that's where his injunctions come into place. Having known all this, him having taught us these various ways that a monk could spend their day devoted to study, devoted to recitation, devoted to teaching, one should dwell in the Dhamma and practice meditation. That is the Buddha's instructions to us. So I think leave that for reflection, and wishing everybody all the blessings of Dhamma practice. And I'll plan to leave the links to these suttas in the description of this video below.